The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years, and in all that time, they had never once worried about the small blue planet called Earth Ambassador. Thelvis of the Volanthi race sat in his private chamber aboard Station Primus, the massive space station that floated at the very center of the galaxy. He was reviewing reports about the lesser species, the ones the Council called developmental, because they were too primitive to matter. The Volanthi were ancient beings made of living crystal and light, and they had watched empires rise and fall across millions of years. Thelvis himself was over 3,000 years old, and he had seen countless young species reach for the stars only to fade into nothing humans, or just another entry in his long list of forgettable creatures. He scrolled through the data on his holographic display, his crystalline fingers moving through the light like water through air. The report said that humanity had been traveling through space for about 300 years now, which was barely a blink of an eye by galactic standards. They had colonized a few dozen worlds in their little corner of the outer rim, a region so far from the galactic center that most council members had never even visited it. Their ships ran on crude fusion engines that could barely push them to a fraction of light speed, and they had no access to the warp gates that allowed the greater civilizations to cross the galaxy in moments. In short, humans were exactly what the Council expected them to be: slow, weak, and completely unremarkable. Thelvis was about to close the report when something caught his attention. A small note from a junior analyst had been flagged at the bottom of the document, and it mentioned an anomaly in human ship movements. He opened the note and read it with growing confusion. The analyst had been tracking human vessel trajectories as part of routine surveillance, and she had noticed something strange. Several human ships had traveled between star systems faster than their registered engine specifications should allow. Much faster. One ship had crossed a distance of 40 light years in just under 2 weeks, which should have been impossible for a species without warp gate access. Their fusion drives could never produce that kind of speed. Not even close. Thelvis considered the report for a long moment before dismissing it with a wave of his hand. It was obviously a sensor error or a calculation mistake, because there was simply no way that humans had developed faster than light travel without the Council knowing about it. The very idea was absurd. Deleted the flag and moved on to more important matters, never realizing that he had just ignored the most significant piece of intelligence in galactic history far across the galaxy. On a space station orbiting the planet Mars, Admiral James Okonkwo stood before a massive observation window and watched as the newest ship in humanity's secret fleet completed its final systems check. The vessel was called the Prometheus, and it was beautiful in a way that made the Admiral's heart swell with pride. Its hull was sleek and black, covered in panels that seemed to drink in the light around them, and strange energy patterns rippled across its surface like waves on a dark ocean. This ship could do something that no other vessel in the galaxy could do, and that simple fact was about to change everything. 20 years ago, a team of scientists at the Lunar Hawking Institute had made a discovery that should have been impossible. They had found a way to interact with dark matter, the invisible substance that made up most of the universe's mass but could never be seen or touched. Dark matter was everywhere, flowing through galaxies like rivers of invisible energy, connecting stars and planets in a vast web that spanned the cosmos. Other species knew it existed, but believed it could never be harnessed, never be used. They were wrong. Dr. Elena Vasquez had led the team that cracked the secret, and now she stood beside Admiral Okonkwo on the observation deck, her eyes bright with excitement and fear in equal measure. "She is ready," Elena said softly, her voice filled with wonder at what they had created. The Admiral nodded slowly, his face showing the weight of responsibility he carried. He was a tall man with dark skin and gray hair, and his military uniform bore the marks of 30 years of service to the Terran fleet. How many ships do we have now? He asked. 147, Elena replied. All equipped with dark matter drives, all capable of crossing the galaxy in weeks instead of years. James turned to look at her, and his expression was serious. The Council still does not know? No, Elena confirmed. We have been very careful. Our ships appear on their sensors as normal fusion vessels. And we only use the dark matter drives in deep space where no one is watching. This was the secret that humanity had kept for 2 decades. They had found a way to surf the invisible currents of dark matter that flowed between the stars, traveling faster and farther than any other species in the galaxy. No fuel costs, no warp gates, no limitations. They called it Project Prometheus, named after the ancient god who stole fire from the heavens and gave it to humanity. It was fitting, because that was exactly what they had done. The Council controlled the warp gates, and through them they controlled all travel and trade across the galaxy. Species that displeased them could be cut off from civilization with a single command, trapped in their home systems forever. But humans did not need their gates anymore. Admiral Okonkwo had spent years building this shadow fleet in secret, knowing that revealing it too early would bring destruction upon his people. The Council would never allow a primitive species to possess such power, and the Kethrani war fleets would descend upon Earth like wolves upon sheep. So they waited and they built and they trained, preparing for the day when they would have no choice but to show the galaxy what humanity could do. That day came sooner than anyone expected. A communication officer rushed onto the observation deck, her face pale with alarm. Admiral, she said urgently, we have received a distress signal from New Tangier. James felt his blood run cold. New Tangier was a human colony world on the edge of their territory, home to over 2 million people. What is happening? He demanded. The officer's voice shook as she delivered the news. The Kethrani Third Armada is moving toward the planet. 300 warships, Admiral. They will arrive in 6 hours. Elena gasped beside him, her hand covering her mouth in horror. The Kethrani were one of the most powerful military species in the galaxy, and they had made no secret of their contempt for humanity. Our nearest conventional fleet is 6 weeks away, the officer continued. There is nothing we can do to stop them in time. Admiral Okonkwo stood very still for a long moment, his mind racing through the options. 2 million innocent people were about to die, and the galaxy expected humanity to be helpless to stop it. But humanity was no longer helpless. He turned to Elena, and she saw the decision in his eyes before he spoke. It is time, he said quietly. Elena nodded, understanding what this meant. The secret was about to be revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Admiral Okonkwo straightened his uniform and walked toward the command center, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Signal the Prometheus fleet, he ordered. All ships are to engage dark matter drives immediately. We are going to New Tangier. The crew scrambled to obey, and across the solar system, 147 black ships began to power up engines that the galaxy did not know existed. Humanity was done hiding. The shockwaves were about to begin. Dr. Elena Vasquez had dreamed of this moment for 20 years, but now that it was finally happening, she felt only fear. She stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as the ship prepared to do something that would change the course of galactic history. Around her, officers moved with calm efficiency, their training overcoming the terror that lurked beneath their professional masks. Admiral Okonkwo sat in the command chair at the center of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. He looked calm, but Elena knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders and the tightness around his jaw. All ships report ready, announced Commander Sarah Wells from the tactical station. Dark matter drives are charged and standing by. James nodded slowly. What is the status of the Kethrani fleet? He asked. They are 4 hours from New Tangier, Sarah replied. Their course has not changed. 4 hours. That was how long 2 million people had to live if humanity did nothing. Elena remembered the day she had first discovered the secret of dark matter. It had been an accident, really, a failed experiment that produced unexpected results. She had been trying to measure gravitational waves from a distant black hole when her instruments detected something impossible. Dark matter was responding to her equipment for centuries. Scientists had known that dark matter existed because they could see its effects on galaxies and stars. But no one had ever found a way to interact with it directly. It was like trying to grab a shadow or hold a ghost, but Elena had done it. And that single moment had set humanity on a path toward the stars. She had spent years studying the phenomenon, slowly learning how to harness the dark matter currents that flowed invisibly through the universe. It turned out that dark matter formed a vast network of filaments connecting galaxies, like highways of invisible energy that stretched across the cosmos, and if you knew how to ride those currents, you could travel faster than anyone had ever imagined possible. The Terran government had classified her discovery immediately, recognizing its potential to change everything. They had built secret research stations and hidden shipyards, pouring trillions of credits into developing technology that could exploit this new power. Elena had watched her dream become reality. One ship at a time. Now 147 of those ships floated in formation around the Prometheus, each one crewed by men and women who understood that they were about to step into legend. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Chun from the communication station, "I am receiving a message from Earth Command. Put it through." James ordered. The face of General Marcus Stone appeared on the screen, his expression grave. He was the commander of all Terran military forces, and he had been one of the few people who knew about Project Prometheus from the beginning. "Admiral Okonkwo," he said, "you understand what will happen once you engage your drives. The Council will detect your arrival at New Tangier. They will know what we have been hiding." "I understand," James replied steadily. "There will be no going back," the general continued. "Once the galaxy sees what we can do, they will either accept us as equals or try to destroy us. Are you prepared for that?" Admiral Okonkwo looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing the fear and determination in their eyes. These were ordinary people who had signed up to protect their species, and now they were being asked to carry the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. He turned back to the screen. "General, 2 million of our people will die if we do nothing. I would rather face the wrath of the entire galaxy than abandon them to the Kathrani." General Stone nodded, and something like pride flickered across his weathered face. "Then go with God, Admiral. Make them remember this day." The transmission ended, and silence fell across the bridge. James stood up from his chair and walked to the center of the room, where everyone could see him. He was not a man who gave speeches, but he knew that his crew needed to hear something before they crossed this threshold. 20 years ago, he began. Dr. Vasquez gave humanity a gift. She gave us the power to stand on our own, to travel the stars without begging permission from those who would keep us as pets. He paused, letting his words sink in. "We have kept this secret because we knew the galaxy was not ready to accept us. We knew that revealing our true strength would bring danger upon our people. But today, danger has come anyway." His voice grew stronger. "The Kathrani believe they can slaughter our colonists without consequence. They believe that humanity is weak, that we are prey to be hunted. In the next few hours, we are going to teach them how wrong they are." Elena felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened. This was what she had worked for, what she had sacrificed everything to achieve. "When we arrive at New Tangier," the Admiral continued, "we will not hide what we are. We will show the galaxy that humanity has grown beyond their expectations. We will show them that we are not afraid." He turned to face the view screen, where the stars waited, "and if they come for us afterward, if they try to destroy us for daring to reach beyond our station, then we will face them together." Because that is what humans do. We survive, we adapt, and we never give up. Commander Wells spoke up from her station. Admiral, all ships are awaiting your order. James Okonkwo took a deep breath. Engage dark matter drives, he commanded. Take us to New Tangier. Elena watched through the observation windows as reality itself seemed to shift around them. The stars stretched into long ribbons of light, bending and twisting as the ship slipped into the dark matter currents. The sensation was unlike anything else in the universe. There was no violent acceleration, no crushing G-forces. Instead, it felt like the ship was simply stepping sideways out of normal space and into something else. Entirely colors that had no name rippled across the view screen. And Elena felt the familiar tingling sensation that came from traveling through the dark matter streams. It was as if the universe itself was reaching out to embrace them. Transit. Time to New Tangier is approximately 43 minutes, reported the navigation. Officer, it's 3 minutes to cross a distance that would take conventional ships 6 weeks. 43 minutes to reach a battle that the enemy believed was already won. Elena walked over to stand beside the Admiral. And they watched the impossible colors of dark matter space flow past the ship. Are you ready for this? She asked quietly. James gave her a tired smile. I have been ready for 20 years, he replied. I just hoped I would never have to prove it. She understood what he meant. They had built this fleet to protect humanity, but there was always a part of them that hoped they would never need to use it. War was not something to celebrate, even when it was necessary. The Kathrani will be shocked, Elena said. They have never seen anything like our ships. Good, James replied. Shock will make them hesitate, and hesitation will save lives. He turned to address the bridge crew. All hands, prepare for combat. We will drop out of dark matter space on the far side of the New Tangier system. The enemy fleet will not detect us until we are already upon them. Officers acknowledged his orders and began final preparations. Weapons were charged, shields were activated, and targeting computers locked onto the coordinates where the Kathrani fleet would be. Elena returned to her station and watched the countdown timer tick towards 0 in 43 minutes. Everything would change. The galaxy believed that humanity was weak and primitive, a species barely worth noticing. In 43 minutes, they would learn the truth humanity had been hiding in plain sight. Growing stronger with every passing year, waiting for the moment when they would finally step out of the shadows. That moment had arrived, and the shockwaves were about to ripple across every corner of the galaxy. War Marshal Kethros stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and watched the planet New Tangier grow larger on his view screen. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armored scales covering his body. His species, the Kathrani, were warriors born and bred, and they had conquered dozens of systems across the galaxy through strength and savagery. Today would be another easy victory. How long until we reach weapons range? He growled, his deep voice echoing through the command deck. 2 hours, War Marshal, replied his tactical officer, a younger Kathrani named Voronek. The human colony has no significant defenses. Their orbital stations are civilian models with no military capability. Kethros bared his teeth in what passed for a smile among his people. And their nearest fleet? 6 weeks away by conventional travel, Verena confirmed. The humans cannot possibly reach this system in time to save their colony. The War Marshal felt satisfaction spreading through his chest. The humans had been expanding too quickly, settling worlds that were too close to Kathrani territory. They needed to learn their place in the galactic order, and what better lesson than the destruction of 2 million of their kind? The Council would complain, of course. They always complained when the Kathrani exercised their military power. But they would do nothing, because they needed Kathrani warships to maintain order across the galaxy. Besides, Who would stand up for a primitive species like humanity? Kathros turned away from the view screen and walked toward his private chambers. There was nothing to do now but wait, and he wanted to rest before the slaughter began. He had just reached the door when Voronak's voice stopped him. "War Marshal," the tactical officer said slowly, confusion clear in his tone. "I am detecting anomalous readings at the edge of the system." Kathros paused and turned back. "Explain." "I'm not sure how to explain it," Voronok admitted. "Space itself seems to be distorting near the outer planets. It is like nothing I have ever seen." The War Marshal strode back to the tactical station and looked at the readings himself. Voronok was right. Something strange was happening at the far reaches of the new Tangier system. Something that made no sense. Could it be a warp gate opening? Kathros asked. "No, War Marshal. Warp gates have a distinct energy signature, and this is completely different. It almost looks like reality itself is being bent or folded." Before Kathros could respond, the anomaly resolved itself into something that made his blood run cold. Ships emerged from the distortion. Not one or two, but dozens, and then hundreds. They appeared as if stepping through an invisible doorway, their black holes shimmering with energy patterns that the Kathrani sensors could not identify. "What is this?" Kathros demanded. Voronak's scales had gone pale with shock. "They appear to be human vessels, War Marshal. Over 100 of them. But that is impossible. Humans do not have ships like these." The War Marshal stared at the view screen as the human fleet formed into a battle line facing his armada. They were smaller than Kathrani warships, sleek and elegant, where his vessels were brutal and massive, but something about them felt wrong. Dangerous in a way he could not explain. "Open a channel to their flagship," Kathros ordered. "I want to speak with whoever commands this fleet." A moment later, a human face appeared on his screen. It belonged to a dark-skinned male with gray hair and calm eyes, wearing a military uniform that bore the marks of high rank. "I am War Marshal Kathros of the Kathrani Third Armada," he announced. "You are interfering with a military operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." The human regarded him without fear, which was unusual. Most species trembled when facing Kathrani battle fleets. "I am Admiral James Okonkwo of the Terran Prometheus fleet," the human replied. "You are threatening a human colony world. Turn your ships around and leave this system, or face the consequences." Kathros laughed, a harsh barking sound that filled his command deck. "You dare threaten me? You bring 100 ships against my 300, and you speak of consequences? Your primitive species does not understand what you are facing." Admiral Okonkwo's expression did not change. "I understand perfectly, War Marshal. I understand that you believe humanity is weak. I understand that you plan to slaughter millions of innocent people to teach us our place." He leaned forward. "Slightly. I am here to teach you a different lesson." Kathros snarled and cut the transmission. "All ships, attack formation," he commanded. "Destroy these human fools and then burn their colony to ash." 300 Kathrani warships surged forward, their weapons charging and their crews eager for battle. They had never lost a fleet engagement in over 1,000 years, and they were not about to start today. The human ships held their position, not retreating, not advancing. They simply waited. Voronak's voice cut through the battle preparations. "War Marshal, I am detecting massive energy buildups from the human vessels. The readings are off the scale. I do not understand what kind of weapons they are charging." "It does not matter," Kathros growled. "Our shields can withstand anything these primitives throw at us." The two fleets closed the distance between them, and Kathrani plasma cannons began to fire. Brilliant bolts of superheated energy streaked across space toward the human ships, and then something impossible happened. The human ships rippled with dark energy, and waves of distorted space rolled outward from their hulls. These waves struck the incoming plasma bolts and simply erased them, bending the energy away into nothingness. Cathers felt the first flicker of doubt enter his mind. What was that? He demanded before anyone could answer. The human weapons fired. They were not plasma cannons or missiles, or any weapon the Kethrani had ever encountered. Instead, they were focused waves of gravitational force. Concentrated dark matter distortions that twisted space itself into a weapon. The first wave struck the lead Kethrani ships, and the results were catastrophic warships that had survived 100 battles, crumpled like paper as gravity itself turned against them. Their shields meant nothing. Their armor meant nothing. The fundamental forces of the universe were being wielded like a blade, and no defense could stop them. Kethros watched in horror as his fleet began to die ship after ship collapsed under the gravitational assault. Their hulls crushed, their crews killed instantly. Explosions blossomed across his formation as vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were destroyed in moments. Impossible, he whispered. This is impossible. Voronak was frantically trying to coordinate a response, but there was no response to make. Kethrani weapons could not penetrate the human defenses, and Kethrani shields could not stop the gravitational waves. The battle lasted 11 minutes when it was over. 263 Kethrani warships drifted as shattered wreckage. The survivors, barely 40 vessels, had broken formation and were fleeing toward the edge of the system. Kethros stood alone on his command deck, surrounded by the bodies of officers who had died when a gravitational wave had clipped his ship. He was wounded, bleeding from a dozen cuts, but he barely felt the pain. All he could feel was shock and something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. His view screen crackled to life, and Admiral Okonkwo's face appeared again. War Marshal, the human said calmly, your fleet is destroyed. My ships will allow your survivors to retreat. Take them home and deliver this message to your leaders. Kethros said nothing. He could not find words. Humanity desires peace, Admiral Okonkwo continued. But we will not be prey. We will not be victims. We will not be dismissed. If you come for our worlds again, we will respond with everything we have. He paused, and his eyes seemed to look directly into Kethros' soul. Remember this day, War Marshal. Remember what happened when you underestimated humanity. And tell your council that everything they thought they knew about us was wrong. The transmission ended, and Kethros was left alone with the ruins of his fleet. The galaxy had just changed forever, and he knew it. Humanity was no longer a footnote in galactic history. They had announced themselves with fire and fury, and the shockwaves would be felt for generations to come. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never known such chaos. Ambassador Delva stood at his podium and watched as representatives of 100 different species shouted over one another, their voices blending into a roar of confusion and fear. Holographic displays floated throughout the vast room, each one showing the same footage over and over again. Human ships appearing from nowhere, destroying an entire Kethrani fleet in minutes, and then vanishing back into the void. The crystalline Volanti diplomat had lived for over 3,000 years, and he had never seen anything like this. The council chamber, which had maintained order across the galaxy for millennia, was falling apart around him. Order! He called out, his voice amplified by the chamber systems. We must have order. But no one was listening. A massive Kethrani representative was screaming demands for immediate war against humanity. Beside him, a delegation of Morjuan trade lords were frantically calculating what this development meant for their warp gate monopoly. Smaller species huddled together in terrified groups, wondering if they would be caught in the crossfire of whatever conflict was about to erupt. The doors to the chamber burst open, and War Marshal Kethros limped inside. Room fell silent instant-like. Kethros looked nothing like the proud warrior who had led the Third Armada into battle. His scales were dull and cracked. His uniform was torn and blood-stained, and one of his arms hung uselessly at his side. But it was his eyes that truly showed the change. They held a haunted quality. The look of someone who had witnessed something that shattered everything he believed. "War Marshal," Thelva said carefully, "we were told you survived the battle. Please, tell the council what happened." Kethros walked slowly to the center of the chamber, and every eye in the room followed him. "I took 300 warships to New Tangier," he began, his voice rough and quiet. "The finest vessels in the Kethrani fleet. Crewed by warriors who had never known defeat." He paused, and something like shame crossed his brutal features. "The humans destroyed 263 of them in 11 minutes. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. Even those who had watched the footage could not quite believe it until they heard the words from the war Marshal himself. "That is impossible," declared Council of Rentok, a high-ranking Kethrani official. "Our ships are the most powerful in the galaxy. No primitive species could defeat them so easily." "I watched it happen," Kethros replied flatly. "Our weapons did nothing. Our shields did nothing. They bent space itself into a weapon and crushed my fleet like insects beneath a boot." He turned to look directly at Thelvis. "We were wrong about them, Ambassador. We were all wrong. The humans are not primitives. They have technology that makes our greatest achievements look like children's toys." Thelvis felt a cold sensation spreading through his crystalline body. He remembered the analyst's report, the one he had dismissed as a censor error. He remembered ignoring the signs because he could not believe that a species like humanity could have developed something beyond the Council's understanding. His arrogance had blinded him. And now the galaxy would pay the price. Counselor Morjuan 7 of the Trade Federation rose from his seat, his mechanical body whirring with anxiety. "If the humans can travel without warp gates," he said, "then our entire economy is at risk. We control galactic trade because we control the gates. If species can bypass them entirely, our power means nothing." "This is not about trade," snarled Rentak. "This is about survival. We must assemble the combined fleets of the Council and destroy humanity before they grow any stronger." "And how do you propose we do that?" Thelvis asked wearily. "We just witnessed their technology obliterate the finest military force in the galaxy. What makes you think a larger fleet would fare any better?" "We have numbers," Rentak insisted. "We have experience. We have resources they cannot match. Numbers mean nothing against weapons that ignore our defenses," Kethros said quietly. "I had 3-1 advantage at New Tangier, and they cut through my fleet like it was nothing." The Kethrani counselor glared at the War Marshal with barely concealed fury. "Then what do you suggest? That we simply accept this? That we allow a species we classified as developmental to dictate terms to the Galactic Council?" Before Kethros could respond, a chime sounded throughout the chamber. All eyes turned to the communications display, where a junior officer appeared with a pale face. "Honored council members," she announced, "a human vessel has arrived at the outer perimeter of Station Primus. They are requesting permission to dock." Silence fell across the chamber once again. "How is that possible?" Morjuan 7 demanded. "Earth is on the far side of the galaxy. Even with warp gates, it would take weeks to reach us. They traveled without gates," Thelvis said heavily. "That is the point. They can go anywhere they want, whenever they want." He turned to address the communications officer. "What do they want?" "A human ambassador wishes to address the council," the officer replied. "Her name is Sarah Chun, and she says she comes to discuss the future relationship between humanity and the galactic community." Rentak slammed his clawed fist against his podium. "We should destroy their ship and send the wreckage back to Earth as a warning. And start a war we cannot win?" Thelvis responded sharply. "Use your brain, counselor. They came here alone. One ship against an entire station filled with warships. That is not arrogance. That is confidence. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. They know we cannot stop them, and they came anyway. That means they want to talk, and we would be fools to refuse. The debate raged for another hour, but in the end, Thelvis convinced the majority to grant the human ambassador permission to address the council. They had no real choice. Refusing would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Besides, part of him wanted to understand. How had humanity done this? How had they hidden such incredible technology from the greatest civilizations in the galaxy? And most importantly, what did they want? As the council prepared for the human delegation's arrival, Thelvis retreated to his private chambers and pulled up every piece of information the council had ever collected about humanity. He read about their history, their wars, their struggles. He learned about the ice ages that had nearly wiped them out, the diseases that had killed billions, the weapons they had created that could destroy their own world, and he began to understand something that filled him with a strange mixture of respect and fear. Humanity had spent their entire existence fighting for survival against a universe that seemed determined to destroy them. They had clawed their way up from caves and mud, surviving catastrophe after catastrophe. Through nothing but determination and ingenuity, the council had looked at their primitive technology and dismissed them as unimportant. But technology was not what made a species. Dangerous will was what made a species dangerous. And humanity had more of it than any civilization Thelvis had ever encountered. He closed the files and sat in silence, waiting for the moment when he would face Ambassador Chun and learn what humanity intended to do with their newfound power. The shockwaves from New Tangier were still spreading across the galaxy, and Thelvis suspected they were only beginning to feel the first tremors. Whatever came next would change everything, for better or worse, and for the first time in 3,000 years. Ambassador Thelvis of the Volanti had no idea what the future would hold. Ambassador Sarah Chun walked through the corridors of Station Primus with her head held high and her footsteps steady. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled back from a face marked by decades of diplomatic service. Her career had been spent being dismissed by alien powers who saw her species as insignificant, primitive, barely worth acknowledging. Those days were finally over. Behind her walked two aides and a small security detail, all of them dressed in the crisp black uniforms of the Terran diplomatic corps. They moved with confidence despite being surrounded by alien guards who watched them with a mixture of fear and hostility. Corridors of Station Primus were magnificent, built from materials that gleamed like liquid silver and filled with artwork from 1,000 different civilizations. This was the heart of galactic power, the place where the destiny of countless worlds had been decided for 12,000 years. And today, humanity would finally have a voice in those decisions. The doors to the Grand Chamber opened before her, and Sarah stepped inside. The room was enormous, a vast amphitheater filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Strange alien faces watched her from tiered seating that rose toward a domed ceiling, decorated with star maps and historical murals. She had studied these species for years, learning their languages and customs and histories. She knew the proud Kethrani warriors and the calculating Morjuan traders. She recognized the ancient Volanti and the insectoid Rickstar and dozens of others. They had all dismissed humanity at one point or another. Now, they sat in silence as she walked to the central podium, their eyes following her every move. Ambassador Thelvis spoke first, his crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. Ambassador Chun, you stand before the Galactic Council. Your species has recently demonstrated capabilities that have caused considerable concern among our member civilizations. Sarah nodded calmly. I understand your concern, Ambassador Thelvis. A species you consider primitive has revealed technology that surpasses your own. That must be unsettling. Murmurs rippled through the chamber at her directness. Most species approached the council with deference and careful diplomacy. Not blunt honesty. Counselor Vrentak rose from the Kethrani section, his scales bristling with anger. You destroyed our fleet, he snarled. You killed thousands of our warriors. And now you come here to mock us? I came here to prevent further bloodshed, Sarah replied evenly. Your fleet was about to slaughter 2 million innocent civilians. We stopped them. That was not mockery. That was survival. You should have been content with your place in the galaxy, Vrentak continued. Developmental species do not build weapons that can threaten the great powers. You have violated the natural order of things. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her expression calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for her entire career. The natural order, she repeated slowly. Let me tell you about the natural order as humanity has experienced it. She gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. They showed images of Earth's history, from the earliest days of human existence to the present, 65 million years before my species evolved. An asteroid struck our world and wiped out most life on the planet. We survived because our ancestors were small enough to hide underground. The images shifted to show ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues. We nearly went extinct at least 6 times before we even developed civilization. Our world tried to kill us again and again. And we survived through nothing but stubbornness and adaptability. She paused, letting the images sink in. Then we reached for the stars, and we discovered we were not alone. We found a galaxy full of species who looked at us and saw primitives, animals barely worth noticing. We heard your representatives call us developmental, a polite word for insignificant. Her voice grew stronger. We watched your warships patrol our borders. We listened to your traders charge us 10 times the fair price for basic goods because they knew we had no leverage. We saw how the Kethrani treated species they considered inferior, and we knew that one day they would come for us too. She looked directly at War Marshal Kethrus, who sat in the audience with his wounds still healing. So we prepared. We did not build our dark matter technology to conquer or threaten. We built it because the universe taught us a simple lesson. Those who cannot defend themselves do not survive. Silence filled the chamber. Ambassador Thelvus leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying her with new interest. You kept this technology secret for 20 years, he said. Why reveal it now? Why not continue to hide until you were even stronger? Because we did not want to fight a war, Sarah answered. We wanted to be left alone, to grow and develop in peace. But War Marshal Kethrus took that choice away from us when he sent 300 ships to destroy New Tangier. She turned to address the entire council. Now you all know what we can do. The question is, what happens next? Do we become enemies, fighting a war that will cost millions of lives on both sides? Or do we find a better path? Marjuan 7 spoke up from the Trade Federation section. What do you want, Ambassador? You have shown us your strength. Surely you have demands. Sarah nodded. Humanity wants 3 things. First, a full seat on this council with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. We will no longer be classified as developmental or treated as lesser beings. The request was expected, and several representatives nodded grudgingly. Second, an end to all hostile actions against human colonies and vessels. Any species that attacks us will face the full response of our fleet, also expected. Vrentak scowled but said nothing. Third, Sarah continued, and her voice softened slightly. We want to share our knowledge. This caught the council off guard. Surprised murmurs filled the chamber. Share your knowledge? Thelvus repeated, clearly confused. You would give away the technology that makes you powerful? We would share it with the entire council, Sarah clarified. Dark matter propulsion, gravitational manipulation, all of it. Freely, without restrictions. The chamber erupted in confused discussion. Species that had been expecting threats and demands were suddenly faced with an offer of partnership that made no sense to their way of thinking. "Why would you do this?" Telvis asked when the noise had died down. "You could use your advantage to dominate the galaxy. Why give it away?" Sarah smiled, and it was a genuine expression that carried centuries of human hope and determination. "Because we do not want to dominate the galaxy. We want to be part of it. We want to explore the stars alongside you, to solve problems together, to build something greater than any of us could build alone." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every species she could see. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting for survival. We are tired of fighting. We want something better. We want peace and cooperation and partnership. But we will not beg for those things, and we will not accept them on your terms. Her voice grew firm. We offered the council a choice. You can accept us as equals, and together we can enter a new era of exploration and prosperity. Or you can reject us, and we will go our own way, building our own alliances and our own future. She paused. But I promise you this, whatever you decide, humanity will never again be dismissed or underestimated. We have earned our place among the stars, and we intend to claim it. The vote took 3 days of intense debate. The Kethrani and their allies abstained in bitter silence, unable to accept that a species they had once dismissed could have risen so far so fast. But the majority of the council saw the wisdom in Sarah's offer when the final tally was announced. Humanity had achieved what no other species had accomplished in 12,000 years of galactic history. They had risen from obscurity to equality in a single-generation ambassador. Thelvis personally welcomed Sarah Chun to the council as a full representative of the Terran government. He was the first alien to shake her hand, a gesture he had learned from human cultural files. "You have surprised us all," he admitted quietly. "I dismissed your species once. I will not make that mistake again." Sarah smiled. "We have surprised ourselves many times, Ambassador. That is how humanity has always survived." As she returned to her ship to bring news of the victory back to Earth, Sarah looked down at the stars streaming past and allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Humanity had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Now it was time to help build something better. The age of hiding was over. The age of humanity had just begun.